Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the Representation Station. Today is Monday, June 22nd. We're a few minutes late. Sorry for the technical difficulties, but we are now live. I have Roger and our special guest, Paul Rosenzweig, who I had the chance of meeting. He actually, I think, taught one of my classes back in at Georgetown Law. I think you were a professor at GW, or you were teaching there, and you came over and you gave a talk in a class. And we ended up having coffee about something. And but since then, a number of things have happened, such as the election of President Donald J. Trump twice, and we also have a beautiful organization that you've helped charter, the Society for the Rule of Law. And obviously, here, we're about relieving the pressure on the judiciary by uncapping the U.S. House of Representatives. One of my fundamental beliefs is that the increased pressure on the judiciary is a direct result of the enormous size of the executive branch without a legislature that is actually competent or capable or responsive to the people, such that it could oversee its various powers and duties and actions. And as a result, that all falls down to the judiciary. So we see an increasing amount of power and difficulty being foisted upon them. So I'm very excited to speak with Paul. Paul is I think, got his law degree from Chicago. He was the deputy secretary or deputy assistant secretary of Homeland Security from 2005 to 2009. He is a cybersecurity expert. And very interested to get his take on all things happening in the world of cybersecurity. This is obviously very important at the edge of the new warfare landscape. And so I want to start, Paul, with Stuart Baker. For those who don't know, Stuart Baker is started the Cyber Law podcast. Incredible human being. I understand, Paul, one of your early mentors recently passed away, and I just want to take a minute and give a reflection for him, and just kind of to, if you can, bring a little Stu into the podcast and give us some of your reflections of what he may have to say today as we go along. And for the listeners, you were I think, an outspoken never Trumper. You're a conservative, but fundamentally, you have focused your career on cyber law. Is that still where you are? Are you still with Stu, or have you moved on and you're fully focused on the rule of law, or are you somewhere in between?
No, I still do. I mean, in my professional money earning life, I still do mostly cybersecurity law and consulting for people.
Okay.
Nobody pays you to be a never Trumper, right? It's an act of love, or an act of insanity, depending upon your perspective in life, or
Yep.
ultimate sanity, if you will. So most of my work is still most of my professional work is still cybersecurity related in some broad sense. Everything from privacy issues to straight cybersecurity issues to AI issues, to telecoms, spectrum availability issues. I mean, they all are kind of in the tech innovation, cybersecurity, national security space, which is where I live most of the time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so has your political stance hurt your opportunity to earn a living? I mean, the
Oh,
executive branch
I'm
controls.
sure it has. I'm sure it has. I mean, nobody calls me and says I'm not hiring you because you're a never Trumper.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, I'm sure it has also opened up the possibility of people hiring me whom I never would have run into, but for my skepticism about Trump and in particular surveillance activities these days. So I think it's probably well. First off, it doesn't matter, right? Being true to yourself and being true to the rule of law is more important than work. I mean, I'm near enough to the end of my career that I can say that without um, any fear at all. I get that it's different for younger people who are nearer the starts of their careers, but I've got that. But more importantly, yeah, it really is just impossible for me to measure the valence one way or the other. I think probably, overall a net positive, but I'm not sure how much of a net positive. You know.
Mm. Yeah, I mean it is. I mean, this is. I mean, what you described is kind of the stance of a statesman, right? That you're looking at the long road, and it doesn't really matter, right? I mean, your positions, you're doing okay, you're going to be fine, and you took the moral positions that you did because that's what you thought was right. Um, and I think in part there's this sense that Trump is not a statesman, and that's why we need a legislature to counterbalance that because otherwise the again everything falls to the judiciary. Um,
Mhm.
but I wanted to ask you: are there people today that you look around DC and you say that person is a statesman, like a la John Quincy Adams, right? I mean, is there anyone who inspires you? And are they all at the Society for the Rule of Law, or are there people actually in politics who might satisfy that criteria?
Very few at the federal level,
Mm,
right? They all seem to get their courage only when they're on their way out the door. Um,
yeah.
you know, I appreciate their fidelity to the rule of law, but when you know Tom Tillis and John Cornyn only find their voice after they've lost their positions, they're not statesmen in the real sense of the word. Um, you know, the most active statesmen right now are mostly our federal district court judges,
Mm,
um, who are on the front lines every day of upholding the rule of law, come what may. And I include in those the ones who at times rule in favor of Trump because, notwithstanding the fact that what he's planning to do is silly or stupid or foolish, it's legal, and they say so.
yeah.
Um, there are, I think, more active statesmen um, at the uh, at the state level. There are also, I think, some at the federal level in the Democratic Party. Not so many. Most of them are no better. I mean, they're not as bad as the Republican politicians because they haven't been tested as much. But there aren't a lot of them who I would trust with my lunch money.
Mm,
At least not right now. I mean, there used to be, right? I think of Robert C. Byrd of West Virginia, who stood for the institution of the Senate, against his own party president, Bill Clinton. Right?
mm,
But I think of Frank Church, you know, who stood for foreign engagement against the interests of the Idaho potato farmers that he represented.
mm.
Um, there are perilously few of those left. Um, right now in the federal government. It's kind of sad, actually, very sad. There are, of course, a lot of formers who are out there yelling and screaming, but they're formers, right? And in some ways, I kind of, you know, I don't won't say their voices just don't have the same persuasive power if they quit and then speak out.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because John Quincy Adams, after losing, he served his first term, uh, lost re-election, and then he went and served in Congress for like 4 terms or something like that, right?
Yeah, no, he was a great guy.
Well,
Highly
it's just
effective
interesting.
congressman.
Well, I mean, I think this begs the question: why isn't Obama in Congress? Why isn't
That
you
would
you
be a
have
great. Why didn't he run? I mean, we've developed a norm of him not, um,
yeah.
but of presidents not of them fading. But I don't see why that should be the case. Or if not him, why isn't Obama in Congress, right? Or
She's too
some
smart to
close
go to
Obama
Congress.
proxy.
She knows
Well,
better.
Well, that's part of
yeah,
it really is. I mean, you asked the question, and if the vice presidency is a warm bucket of spit, the House of Representatives is right now is a cold bucket of spit. Why anybody
right.
would willingly be a backbencher in a Congress that does nothing,
Yeah,
um, kind of, you get it. I mean, if you're a smart person, you feel like you can do more change outside of that.
right.
But don't you think a lot of them are there to just leverage the position for something more lucrative after?
Some of them, yes, but some of them, it's a life's work to be reelected. They like the perks and the power and the pseudo power, and you know, uh, less so increasingly. You see many more fleeing Congress for other things, but there's still a whole cadre of people who, especially in the Senate, who are happy to continue to be reelected. Notwithstanding the promise not to be. Susan Collins said she'd run for 2 terms, and
Right.
she's in the middle of running for, I think, her fourth. Right?
Something like
Um,
that. Yeah. They always, that's bullshit.
am I allowed to say
Well,
bullshit on this podcast?
You can say anything you want. Yes.
Oh, bull
you
plucky.
can. We are not governed by the FCC's airwave regulations. But I appreciate a fair warning for any French that may come along. Um, and this is kind of, I mean, the reason I think the answer to my question, why isn't Barack Obama in Congress, is because being in Congress is not a great job, right?
No.
And it's a very, very difficult job. You spend a lot of time, fundraising, trying to get reelected. And I guess you're on the podcast. You agreed to come on here. And I assume that's because you agree that we should uncap the House, that this is a solution that you think merits some serious consideration. And, I guess I'm just interested to hear, we haven't talked about this before the show. Just, what do you think that should look like? What makes sense to you?
Well, I mean, I'm relatively agnostic on what the precise solution should be, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not going to fight with my friends over the exact number. I wrote a piece. There's a
Okay.
wonderful series, 100 Ideas in 100 Days, that is being written and published at NYU, um,
Okay.
Democracy Project, and it's 100 creative ideas, and they actually wound up publishing more than 100 because they had so many good ones. And I wrote 3 different pieces for them, and the one that was directly on point to this question was entitled "Pass the First Amendment to the Constitution."
Mm,
Um, I'm sure, because you daven over this. Your listeners probably do not. That when the current the first set of amendments to the Constitution were proposed, there were 12 that were proposed. And in fact, the one that we've come to know is the First Amendment, and that we think of as the thing that they thought most important, was actually
yeah.
the third article proposed, that by the Congress. So it wasn't. So that's a bit of a myth making. The second article was the one that later became our 27th Amendment, that stops congressmen from getting raises until after an election has passed. But the
Mm,
First Amendment would have increased the number of representatives of the House, um, under a systematic formula that, depending upon how you read it, would probably give us a House of 1,100 today, maybe. Um, some people say 1,800. Yeah, I mean, the as with many things that were written in the 1700s, the actual phrasing is slightly ambiguous.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but the First Amendment was basically, we need to increase the size of the House to continuously make sure that the representatives are elected by a relatively small number of their own constituents, that would, you know, uh, uh, make them truly, their representatives in Congress.
mm,
If we had passed the if we had passed that amendment, then today, Houston would have Houston, the city of Houston, fourth largest
Yep.
city in the country, would have 23 representatives, right?
Yep.
And it would be, pretty much impossible to gerrymander that away, no matter how hard you tried. So that would have solved that problem, just on its face. It would be really hard for representatives to get too far away from what their constituents wanted. And that would be true in Houston and in the middle of Montana. Montana would have 18 representatives under this plan. I think that's the number I calculated. So Bozeman, you wouldn't have these unrepresented liberal enclaves in big rural states, and you wouldn't have these unrepresented rural enclaves in California. Right?
Or Illinois.
The Central Valley would have 40 odd, 30 odd representatives, something like that. Which would be good.
Yeah.
I mean, overall, it would be kind of a halfway step to proportional representation, but maintaining a geographic base, which has long been thought of as the hallmark of constituency understanding, right? That the people who tend to live together. Where do you live now, Walter?
I reside. My domicile, rather, is in Laramie, Wyoming.
So the people around Laramie are thought to be different from the people around Cheyenne. Now that may or may not be true, but there you go.
It's the same reason we want Tommy Tuberville to live in Alabama if he's going to be the governor of Alabama. Same logic.
Yeah,
you betcha.
Well, that's good. So, has the 100 Ideas in 100 Days, has that been published?
It's published virtually on NYU's websites. I think it's run out of their Democracy Project. If you want, while we're talking, I can Google a link and find it for you.
No, that's what I'm gonna do. I can Google with the best of them, so I'll do it in the background and I'll pull it up.
And I just got a note from them that they're going to publish it, collect it all, and publish it as a hard copy book.
Oh, good. Yeah, like a table.
Well, I don't know. I mean, nobody buys books anymore, but there you go.
Some people buy books. The president at the No Cap Fund buys books. Jeff Mayhew is he did not go to college, but he is truly a self-study in the ability to, you can teach yourself things. All you got to do is buy books. Let's see. We were talking recently about the anomaly of Barnes and Noble. Barnes and Noble went through bankruptcy, restructured, and actually has been growing again. So some people are not buying books, but the people that buy books continue to. So here it is: NYU's Law and Democracy, 100 Ideas in 100 Days. What's next? Cool. So is there?
Next, I assume, is there an announcement of a book?
Oh, okay, there it is.
Yeah, but if you scroll down to the authors there, you can find under the R's, or actually, I think they do it by first name, so maybe under the P's.
Oh, yes. That's what was here. There you go.
Yep.
All right, good. We'll get this.
You can filter by me. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say we'll get this linked on the website for sure.
Yeah, it's a cool thing.
Very cool. Very good. Yeah. So I mean, passing the amendment. So one thing, I don't know if you've thought about this or if your article contends with it, but the amendment as passed actually creates it is basically the same ratio as is in the Constitution, 1 for 30,000, but it's a max. It's 1 for 50,000 in the proposed amendment, but it's a max. And so there's a question of like, well, how would the Supreme Court interpret this? Would this actually be a max or a min? Because as you know, there was this kind of Scrivener's error or last minute change in the conference amendment between the House and the Senate. And so a while ago, I was just like, well, we need to pass a law, and then once we have an uncapped House, then we probably need some amendments around things like this, right? We need to enshrine our right to representation in the House and the Constitution as was intended, but we should probably have a clean amendment that reflects, I don't know, some deliberation, modern deliberation. And I think it goes along the lines of there's a lot of people who are calling for an Article 5 convention of the states, and some of them are like limited, some of them are unlimited. And for a while, I thought that was a good idea until I read Article 5 closely, and it's like, well, Congress calls the convention of the states, so theoretically they write the rules. But I'm not, not saying it's a good or bad idea, and our organization doesn't take a position on it, but it does kind of bring up the idea in your expertise, which is privacy, right? The idea of privacy in the internet age. We haven't had a constitutional amendment since the invention of the internet. Have you given thought to like actual language that would make sense to kind of like protect fundamental civil liberties, vis-a-vis governments, but also multinational corporations? Like, is there an off button? Can I opt out of being tracked? If I haven't violated the law, or what is, I don't know. I just want to throw it out there.
Well, I mean, it's a great question. I think my general answer is that you can be we can pass laws to allow you to opt out, but their privacy is a very difficult to enforce concept, both against government, because there'll always be a kind of national security exception that will have some validity,
Right.
and against corporations, if only because not all corporations are subject to our uh, subject to our jurisdiction, right? French corporations and British corporations might abide our law. Chinese corporations won't.
Right.
Russian corporations certainly won't. So, I tell my students that the only way to be 100% sure of their privacy is to stay off the internet altogether, which of course nobody will ever do. So it is a real puzzle at this time. I think that the only answers I can give, which are probably the ones I gave in Georgetown 20 years ago, although I don't remember the lecture, is some mix of oversight, accountability, liability, uh, eh, all mixed together in various ways that incentivize uh, creating a system that, at least to some degree, enables privacy activities. But we tend to think of privacy as um, a a natural right, or at least the Europeans do. But it's really a modern invention that comes out of the the obscurity of the industrial age. If we were all transported back to Middle England and we were living in the same town,
Yeah.
there would be no secrets at all in that town. Everybody would know your business, right? And the internet equivalent would be the ladies in the knitting circle or whatever. But privacy is really a relatively modern invention, uh, and then it's being eroded back to where it was. So it's a it's a tough road to hoe to unring that bell.
What do you think of you brought up Europe? What do you think of the European privacy legislation that 5 or 6 years ago, I think the GDPR?
Yeah, I don't know of anybody who actually thinks that it's nice, right? It's good, but it doesn't material. I mean, they fine Google and Google pays the fine,
Right.
and then just goes on doing what it was doing, right? Um, it doesn't significantly materially advance privacy in the sense that you and I really would value it. It's a lot of good stuff for lawyers. I'm sorry, all my European friends who might be hearing this are pulling their hair out right now. But I think if you talk to them, they'd all understand that it's um uh it's a useful discipline that reminds, the law abiding amongst us what to do and what not to do. But, it has no purchase on the non law abiding, which is where the threat comes from.
Yeah. I think there's a there. The other thing that I would say is that because of the national security exception, the exception, I think, must always be able to swallow the rule. And so the remedy to that is having a legislature that can oversee the executive and their actions
That's
to
exactly
then
right.
use the power of the purse, right, to say, you've been a bad executive, and now you're not going to get funding for that program until you demonstrate that you're able to keep your stuff together. And
Yeah.
so, to me, in some ways, the appropriate constitutional amendment to account for the internet is just vastly better representation that also probably utilizes the internet and AI to give us much better customer service to our
I
representatives.
think that's right. I mean, the lack of oversight. I mean, I used to be very strongly of the view that oversight and accountability were good, and that Congress was moderately effective at it. Right? You
Yeah.
think of the Senate Intelligence Committees and the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. In the immediate aftermath of the revelations of CIA misconduct in the 70s, these institutions worked. What
Yeah.
has happened now is not so much that they lack capacity, though that's part of it because the government has gotten too big and they haven't grown with it. But also,
Yeah.
for some reason we've come to misalign the incentives such that representatives of the same party are no longer willing to engage in any oversight of their own party president. Party loyalty
Right.
is superior to loyalty to the rule of law and the Constitution. And that's a product of gerrymandering, funding, social media, a whole 9 yards of things that I really can't. I mean, that's one of the reasons why uncapping the House, kind of is a structural solution that brings with it, institutional reform. I actually just pulled up my paper and I was reminded that one reading of this allows for 6,900 members.
Yes.
Right. I mean, so 6,900 members means he can't be gerrymandered, and there'll at least be some who believe in the rule of law and not the rule of party, right?
Yeah.
Who are more loyal to their friends down the street.
I think we would attract a fundamentally different type of human being to run
Statesman.
for office under those circumstances than we are
Right.
attracting now. Fewer show horses and more workhorses.
Yeah. I think that's absolutely right. And I do also think it is importantly about capacity building within the Congress. And I'm talking about like technical chops, right? Like people who can, like within Congress, staff members who can actually oversee technically what is being done in the executive branch. I think it takes a very special skill set. And although some of those people may exist within certain parts of the U.S. House or the U.S. Senate, I would say by and large they're in the executive branch or in the private sector, right? That's where the jobs are more secure and higher paying. And with a larger house, you could recruit, I think, more of that talent. But more importantly, I mean, I view now a need basically for for there to be a serious effort, I think, to rebuild essentially like a cadre of very gifted lawyers teamed with experts within the U.S. House to really hold people accountable. And the way that they hold people accountable, again, is with the power of the purse. It's not by necessarily prosecuting people, although they should. The power of impeachment is important to come back. But you wrote an article recently about how it's going to take forever to reinvigorate the DOJ. Right? Trump has basically gutted the DOJ. I mean, a U.S. House that is vastly enlarged could and should have the ability to essentially funnel really important cases that the DOJ should prosecute. They should be able to do some of that legwork essentially for them, right? Because those complaints could source from their individual constituents. And some of the first national security apparatuses were in legislatures, like the study of George Washington's conspirators who attempted to assassinate him. All those investigations happened within the legislature, and it seems like all of that has wound up in the executive branch. And suddenly, as we talk about uncapping the House, it's like we also have these tools, the tools of AI, to maybe balance those things out. And you know I'm interested to see if you've given or what thought you have given, because I know you have, just about the technical capabilities in Congress. Do you see them having a role in being technically as literate as the executive branch? Do you think that's ever possible?
Well, I think it's actually essential, right? I mean, uh, first off, there is some there. It used to be, up until very recently, that the most important person for any executive agency was not the chair of their appropriations committee, but the staff clerk
Hmm.
who knew their budget inside and out. There was a
Right.
series of 3 or 4 clerks to the Homeland Security Appropriations Committee who knew everything about where our money was going. They still exist, but apparently Congress has given up on the idea of actually holding a president to account for how he spends the money they've appropriated, right?
Hmm.
Which is, again,
Yep.
getting back to that. There also used to be, institutions within Congress, like the Office of Technology Assessment, that were huge uh, uh, organizations that provided Congress with a scientific expertise on vaccines or on AI or on whatever.
Yeah.
And likewise, a Library of Congress that had researchers who still exist but are now being essentially ignored, who provide Congress with, you know, accurate, nonpartisan analysis on which to base their legislating. So it's not just
Mhm.
the staff of individual congressmen or of individual committees, but an entire ring of Office of Technology Assessment, Library of Congress, General Accounting Office, Government Accounting Office now. Um,
Mhm.
Right.
uh, um, you know, uh, that if, but I think fundamental to all of those is we need to find a way to make Congress want to be Congress again, right?
Yeah.
Even make Congress Congress again, make Congress great again, MCGA.
Yeah.
Because truth be told, even in its atrophied state, if the Congress tomorrow decided to stand up to the president, right? If the Republican majority got religion and said, really, I mean, you look at it, you see it. When he proposes a $1.5 billion slush fund that is a bridge too far, it gets killed,
Yeah.
right? Congress, even its atrophied muscles, when it flexes them, are are
They
are
work.
capable, right? So it's a combination of all these things, empowering them with knowledge, giving them the staff, making them more representative, and changing the structural incentives that make them put party over power, which includes uncapping the House, disassociating them from money. Um,
Mm.
I mean, I wrote another piece for this 100 days on anonymous money and how to get money out of politics.
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah, we go there too.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah, we
interesting.
do.
I want to mention
Go
one
ahead.
thing because George Washington has come up, and Article the First, which is our term for that first uh, amendment that didn't get passed, we call it Article the First. And George Washington came up. Also, keep in mind that the first veto ever issued by a president of this country was a veto issued by George Washington against someone wanting to restrict representation. So it was discussed in the Constitutional Convention. It should be in the Constitution. It was the subject of the first veto. It's been a hot button issue. It was a hot button issue at the birth of the country. and it stayed that way for a long time. And Congress shut it down, and it's nearly forgotten now by the citizenry.
That is
I didn't know that.
the
Well,
truth.
Yes.
What was the provision of the bill?
I don't recall the specifics, so I'd have to go back and read it. He only issued 2 vetoes. The second had to do with the relative number of cavalry units in the Army, something really esoteric, but there was an attempt to restrict representation, and he vetoed it.
Let's see. We can pull that up. I'm interested, Paul, in your do you use AI a lot? Do you have a lot of thoughts about what's going on in the world of AI?
Oh boy, yeah, that's
small
a
topic, right?
I have taught at GW, besides a cybersecurity law and policy class, an artificial intelligence law and policy class.
Okay.
Truth be told, it is the ground on which we are discussing is changing so fast that it's almost impossible to keep up. I am a bit old school, so I don't use law AI to do drafting. I use it for research, but I never use anything that I don't check myself. So it's better at finding things than I am, and so it gives me a list of things I should go and read, and that's good. But in my space, I am reluctant to let it be a first drafter. I've seen too many people get tripped up by it. I assume over time that it's going to get better. I think the fundamental, there are a couple fundamental questions about it that we really need to answer. The most notable of which is, what happens when it makes decisions better than we do, right? It already does in some very limited circumstances. For example, there's a model called Deep Patient that can diagnose schizophrenia better than human doctors can. That really challenges concepts of human agency, right? What it means. In one sense, it becomes malpractice not to rely on Deep Patient, right? You got 2 tools, this one and this one. This one works better, but you're reluctant to use it because you don't understand it. The only thing you know about it is it works better, but you can't say why.
Yeah.
Right? If you choose it, though, and it makes a mistake, how do you assess accountability? You've made the right choice with the only thing that you can, which is the binary choice of which tool to use. Right? There's and the rule of law, which is really our fundamental topic here, is all about accountability. Right. It's all about transparency and accountability and responsibility. I mean, those are the 3 words that basically define the rule of law.
Huh. Yeah, so I mean, the agent needs to be responsible, or the company who develops the agent. I mean,
but they're doing the best. They've not made any mistake, right? So are you now strictly liable for the AI agent? I mean,
it's just negligence.
We could make it a product liability regime, right?
Well, I mean, I guess in my mind, it's like if an AI agent is negligent, then an AI agent is negligent. And,
but what if it's not negligent? What if it's
then it's not? Then there's no liability. But in this case,
what if I can't tell whether it's negligent or not?
Okay, well, I think that would where it would come down to is how do you hire an expert that can testify that it was negligent?
That's right. You can't.
Yeah.
Hire a different AI service.
Competing AI model.
So kind of along these lines, I think whether we like it or not, right? Obviously, it's here, and we do have to grapple with these questions. And one of the ideas that I've thrown around on this podcast is, if we uncap the house, what if we have Congress develop a model that's trained, sandboxed on the Library of Congress, right? And then each congressman can adjust the weights and measures of their model to then help them interact with their constituents, to provide them timely, updates to information, to field questions and problems from constituents, but then also to fact check other members of Congress, right? Obviously, these agents could cross check each other, but then I think most importantly, they could cross check the agents, developed by the executive branch or by companies that are obviously going to be competing for market share. Have you heard that? Do you have any initial reactions?
That's all news to me. Explain to me more how it's going to work.
Yeah.
How they cross check against
So
models that other guys have.
yeah. I mean, I guess my thought is imagine um, a thousand, or say we have 1,600 members, right? So you have 1,600 instances of what is essentially a localized Claude bot or instance of Llama, or obviously a more advanced model that is running for that representative, that has been trained on the Library of Congress. Right, so its training set of data is the same. So each member has the same data set to train on, and you could also imagine a second model that is trained on some classified material. But say for the public model, it's trained on all information contained within the Library of Congress. If you want to add more things to your model that's not in the Library of Congress, then you get it added to the Library of Congress, right? And then the individual members can adjust, weights, measures, guardrails, so that each model, although it's trained on the same information, interprets it slightly differently, right? It interprets it as a farmer may, or as a plumber may, or from a specific perspective that more represents the views that that particular representative is trying to um, communicate or use to communicate with their members, right? And so it could, give specific guardrails around, particular bills that they obviously have supported, right? So, this model, the kind of reinforcement learning piece of that could include staff members kind of doing some of that reinforcement learning around how, one would answer a certain question. And so that way, when somebody, calls up and says, "Hey, I'm having this problem with the VA," right, for the 10th time, that
Hmm.
information is, sorted appropriately for the staff member, could be delivered to the staff member, but then also, the constituent could talk to that model and insert, information, that was provided to them by a different representative, right? So you can imagine like somebody who is in a Tom Tillis type uh, constituent, and is interested in hearing what AOC has to say, or what John Cornyn's model might have to say, or what the model of Thomas Massey may have to say, and it would allow them kind of multiple sources to understand problems, but then also kind of a direct way for the congressman to sort through information from constituents. Um, I don't know, does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean that's a fun idea. It certainly would. Uh, you know, I think the interesting thing is that that becomes more necessary the more number of constituents you have that you need to help, right?
Right.
Or the more busy Congress is, right? Um,
Yeah.
it kind of uncapping the House is in some ways also more about personalizing congressional representation, so that I don't need AI.
Right. I mean, part of my anticipation here is that our initial uncap may be smaller than what I personally think is wisest, but that w- we could continue to like in an uncap. The goal is better customer service, and so I think regardless of how big, I mean, even if you have a district of 50,000 people, that's still a pretty big job, right? I mean, and say
Yeah.
even if it's only half of that amount of people who are your constituents who vote, So you care most about 25,000 people. I mean, that's still a lot of people. That's still a lot of people. And AI, I mean, it just seems well positioned to help provide better customer service. That's what all the companies are using it for, right?
Mhm.
I don't know.
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, I guess that makes some sense to me.
Well,
Okay.
and it would
But
also
I
make it less
appreciate your
likely.
attention.
If you have smaller districts, it makes it less likely your constituents will fall for deep fakes, right? Because they'll have
Right.
a clearer picture of you and what you stand for.
Yeah, I mean,
They'll have seen you more often. They'll be
that's
less
the
likely
thing
to
is
fall
they
for
know
it.
who you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. We're coming up on the hour, and we started a little late, but I know we all have busy lives. So I've got just kind of one. I want to bring it back to the rule of law, and I want to talk about the pardon power, because I think this is just fascinating, and I think it's something you've written about. So the J6 pardons, you think obviously erode the rule of law, and I think what I would like to do is, rather than just focus on that, I would like to focus on that alongside the pardoning of Anthony Fauci, who there are just some documents released about him lying under oath, about certain activities of the U.S. government, or perhaps the propensity to believe the lab leak theory versus the natural origins theory, and why that was such a big deal. But he was pardoned nonetheless by Joe Biden. And I think there are many people in the Trump world who are using that to show the erosion of the rule of law, and there are many people who look at January 6th erosion of rule of law. Is there? I mean, I don't know. Is there some solution to the pardon power? I mean, it's ultimately in this kind of unlimited executive authority. Where are the limits? Is there any solution other than a Congress that can then defund a president who passes the wrong pardons? What are your thoughts on
or get rid of the pardon power?
Okay, yeah,
Right.
okay, yeah. I think that's not
I mean,
a bad
altogether.
idea. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it is a bad idea in the sense that it was original in its original. I mean, look, it kind of almost goes back to the same thing we were just talking about Congress. Make the president president again, right? The pardon
Yeah.
power is not a threat in the hands of a righteous and well-meaning person. It's only
Right.
problematic when it's being sold for tens of $millions of campaign contributions by Donald
Right.
Trump, and it's only necessary for Joe Biden to use it under the threat, sadly quite well realized, of Donald Trump politicizing the Department of Justice and going after Tim Wall. I mean, just today, a court shut down the grand jury investigation of Governor Tim Walz on the grounds that it was utterly illegitimate. Right?
And Fry,
you don't
the
need
Minneapolis mayor too.
Yep, the Minneapolis mayor too.
Jacob Fry.
And you don't need reform to the pardon power if the president is a just man, right? I mean, frankly, if we reinvigorated the impeachment power, such that a person could be impeached for giving shitty, there's my French, giving shitty pardons, then the pardon power would be well cabined, and nobody would give crappy pardons. But it's so on the merits of the things that we're talking about, right? If you're gonna try and judge which are shitty pardons and which are not shitty pardons, you really have to go to the justifications and motivations for them, right? Pardons traditionally have had two grounds. This is what the founder said. One was error correction, right? Mm-hmm. And the other one was civil peace, right? Pardons for the Whiskey Rebellion people, or more recently, Jimmy Carter's pardon of Vietnam deserters who went to Canada, right? It wasn't about whether they'd done something wrong or not. It was, we're going to try and put that all behind us. Or to take a narrow version, Gerald Ford's decision to pardon Nixon, right? Maybe a wrong decision. I can't judge that, but certainly not an illegitimate one, an ill thought out one, or one that would ever
a corrupt one
ever be thought of as a corrupt one that deserves congressional condemnation. Um, you know, you know, given Trump's behavior in the last year and a half, Biden's peremptive pardons of Fauci, Miley, and Liz Cheney are looking actually pretty good. you know, and and uh, uh, and given that more what is it? I think the number's up to 60 J6ers have been rearrested.
Closer to 100, I think.
Closer to 100. There you go. I don't keep up on the numbers.
Yeah.
Trump's pardons are not looking so good, just on the facts of the matter. It would be ideal. Well, I mean, the idea of pardons is so problematic that even at the founding, George Mason said we shouldn't have it. We shouldn't give these to the president. He was a pretty smart guy, prescient in his way. If we're going to reform it and we want to keep it, it has to kind of come out from under the sole presidential prerogative.
Advise and consent.
Is something, or let's just have a pardon commission, right?
Okay.
with 5 representatives, 5 members, one appointed by the president, one appointed by the majority, one appointed by the minority in the Senate, one appointed by the majority and minority in the House, chaired by the Chief Justice. I mean, you can think of all sorts of different ways to do it, but so long as it's in the sole exclusive fief and discretion of the president, then its exercise is going to exclusively be on the character of that man, right? Abraham Lincoln's pardons of in the Civil War era, justified by a man of righteousness, even if you think they were wrong. Gerald Ford, same way. George Washington, Whiskey Rebellion, same thing. Frankly, Donald Trump's pardon of, I think, what is it? The boxer Johnson, Joe Johnson, who was accused of Mann Act violations for transporting a white woman across state lines back in the 1900s. Righteous, even for Trump. He apparently was convinced of it by Sylvester Stallone, they say, right? So, you can see good uses for it. You just need somehow to stop the bad uses. And again, it would be nice if the impeachment power were, because that would be a complete answer, right?
Right. I mean, I think that is. I think the impeachment power and the power of the purse. I mean, I think the founders would have argued that is the check, and that because you read the Federalist Papers, and they all thought the president was going to be kind of a narcissistic weirdo, and that ended up being more or less true over the years, and then just kind of an exceptional example in the reality TV era that we find ourselves in. So I agree. I think it really an uncapped house, I think, is the best solution. I think there are other things we could do to maybe mitigate it. But I think all the meddling, right? If you're going to meddle with the pardon power, it requires an uncapped house, because otherwise people aren't going to trust it. And that's, the issue that I see fundamentally today. You said that the fundamentals of rule of law are transparency, accountability, and what was the third one? Responsibility. Yeah. And I think what those three get you is trust, right? And that's what the rule of law really is after, is trust. And that's what we're lacking, I think, in America today. We need the ability for the two sides of this polarized world to reconcile in facts that they can trust, or a mechanism to resolve those facts. And I think that is fundamentally what an uncapping of the House does. It restores potentially the impeachment power, the power of the purse, to get a wrangle around these very kind of unwieldy executive ideas. So I appreciate you being on here with us, and would welcome you back in the future. I would love, and I think at that point we may have this FISA reauthorization, which I wanted to get to, and the NDAA, and kind of some of the ties that are going on there in the technology world. but we'll have to save that until we have all the facts in hand.
I would love to come back, and I promise next time not to have so much a technical difficulty. My
Absolutely.
apologies again.
No worries. Well, thank you
No
again
worries.
so much, Paul, for being here. Roger, as always, everyone, God bless. Good night, and go get yourself some great representation.
Good deal. Thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
Paul. Bye.
Bye.